just want to take the time to speak to Sophia Gaston, Director of the British Foreign Policy Group, because she's been doing some research into what a post-Brexit British foreign policy could, should, might look like. And she's here to tell us a bit about it. Sophia, good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The departure from the EU is an obvious point in time, isn't it, to review our foreign policy, to assess what kind of relationship with the wider world we want to have. What did you find in terms of both political thinking and public thinking on this?
Well, I think it's really important to look at public opinion here because, of course, we do have this huge global Britain project, which is being underpinned by this enormous integrated review of our foreign policy and defence and security and development policy. But the question is, what do the British people actually want? And this is really important, this question of building public consent and public support for our foreign policy, because we have a much stronger and more powerful voice in the world if you know that you have the British people behind you on that mission. And I think that what's happened since Brexit is we've seen through our surveys, we started doing these in 2017. And just in the past 4 years alone, the degree of interest in our foreign policy has just skyrocketed. People really understand that these decisions, they really have a stake in them. They affect their lives. And of course, they're a real projection of our domestic, social and political identities. So I think it's a really important but very under-researched area of public policy. So what we find in our survey this year is that foreign policy public opinion is evolving dramatically. And it's a bit of a mixed picture, really, because on the one hand, I think if you look at the mood of the nation and you sort of try to pinpoint the midpoint of what people want, I think there is a pretty good foundation for a pretty active, open foreign policy, areas of global leadership. I think people are quite keen for us to work with others, partners, multilateral institutions. But at the same time, that degree of consensus is masking a really considerable degree of polarization. And it's not just politically, it's not just leave, remain. It's also between genders, age groups and regions in the UK.
How interesting. And you talked there about an explosion of interest having happened. What is it possible to say what prompted that? Was it Brexit?
I think it's Brexit because I think, Brexit is at once very much a domestic conversation and an international one. It's about how we see ourselves in the world. And I think that those questions about how we see ourselves in the world are really about who we see ourselves to be. And so when you're asking those questions, what you're actually saying is, what is our modern British identity? What is our relationship to the past? And I'm not surprised at all that, we've been having all these conversations about statues and the legacy of British colonial past and so on, in the same way that we're having conversations about, who do we want to be in the future? Which allies do we want to align ourselves with? And how do we see our place in a rapidly evolving global landscape? This cuts at the heart of who we are.
There's a very live and growing conversation in political circles, isn't there, about, and I include journalism in that, about the UK's relationship with China, the West's relationship with China. But what about attitudes socially here in public opinion towards China? Because it's, it's going to be the, I suppose you've got Russia as well, but it's going to be the big question, isn't it?
Yes. And while public opinion towards Russia has been quite hostile for some time, we're seeing a huge degree of dynamism in public opinion about China that is being shaped month to month, year on year at the moment. And obviously we've had this very electric political conversation about China, particularly over the past 18 months with the Huawei decision and then, of course, the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. Of course, also, we've seen the way in which America and the EU are evolving their own relationships with China. And the British people have been watching all of this and they are concerned. We're seeing attitudes hardening at a really rapid pace. The proportion of Brits who regard China as a critical security threat to Britain has increased by 11 percentage points just in the past year alone. And I think what's concerning for the government, and we know the government is trying to kind of find a third way approach here to say, yes, we do need to get tougher on security. We are going to challenge on human rights, but we also want to engage on shared global challenges like climate change. We do want an economic relationship with this very dynamic region. The problem is, as our survey makes clear, the British people are rather sceptical of pretty much any form of engagement with China, and only around a fifth will support any kind of economic ties. So I think if the government wants to pursue that balanced approach, they're going to have to go back to the British people and really make the case.
And just a final one on who our special relationship will be with or is with now. The US or the EU?
Well, I think this is such a striking finding from our report, is that, we asked the British people which relationship is more important to the United Kingdom, our relationship with the EU or the United States. And even though we've had this very fractious Brexit debate, and it's often been presented as a kind of dichotomy that half the country is for moving towards the US, half towards the EU. Actually, what we find is that there is a real consensus that the EU relationship is our most important. 53% of Brits say that's our most important relationship, compared to just 27% who believe the same for the United States. So I think in that we can see a degree of pragmatism about the realities of our geography that moves beyond this question about us being in or out of the European Union, but says these people are on our doorstep. They're incredibly important, not just trading, but foreign policy and security partners. So I think there is a glimmer of hope there for a more pragmatic, less emotive debate in the future.
Sophia, really interesting. Thank you for joining us today. Sophia Gaston, Director of the British Foreign Policy Group.